having my education read out. I want to talk about the wind industry. I want to challenge a few assumptions that people make about the future cost of wind. People do talk about the cost of wind coming down. I'd like to share with you some thoughts about just how much that could come down. I want to tap on a little bit about Artemis as well. I'll do that right at the end, but just briefly, we're a technology licensing and development company in Antwerp. We've been running for quite a number of years now. We have only a small number of employees. The thing that we're most proud of, our best achievement at the moment, is a hybrid car that we developed with the assistance of the Energy Saving Trust and with Bosch Rexroth, which is part of the Bosch Corporation. This hybrid car that we built ourselves in Edinburgh achieved a 50% fuel saving in city driving, which is easily the best hydraulic transmission out there. The secret to that is in our technology, which is in the hydraulic pumps and motors that operate that. So a hydraulic transmission in itself isn't altogether new. It's just what we do with it. Looking now at wind, this is the graph that has brought so many people into the industry. It's the 20% cumulative annual growth rate. I'm sure there will be a little, well, maybe there won't be a dip in 2008, but the progression won't be quite as good. I want to turn a little bit management school on you, business school on you now, and describe this in terms of the technology life cycle. I hope it's a concept that's familiar to a lot of you. Essentially, this says that every technology has its day. I don't want to talk too much about the death of technologies, but about what happens to costs during the growth phase there. Now, I'm not basing this on any particular data. I don't have the models to back this up, but it's happened to so many technologies before. Why should wind be any different? What tends to happen is costs fall. They actually fall very dramatically. Think of mobile phones, cars, air travel, anything like that. I don't see any reason why wind power shouldn't be any different from this. Talking about really very dramatic, game-changing reductions in costs. What is going to drive that is a little bit of optimization. That's already going on. Of course, that happens all the time. There'll be a lot of new people coming into the industry and a lot of new disruptive technologies. In fact, the Global Wind Energy Council does foresee some sort of cost reduction. You can see there recently, I don't know whether you can make out the time frame across the bottom. It's very non-linear. To the right we have 2030, in the middle is 2010. So costs have been rising. That's something that's been recognized due to steel prices and demand. People worrying about the risk of supply of turbines and gearboxes in particular. So there's a prediction that costs will fall in the future, and various different scenarios that GWC have forecast there. Well, I want to tell you about a few things I've observed in the wind sector at the moment that I think should start to worry the established players a little bit. This is just showing that optimization is happening. So this is a quote from Vestas' website. I don't mean to pick Vestas in particular. Of course, optimization is happening everywhere. Where are these costs going to be reduced mainly? I think this is a very informative presentation here that was zoomed out. I just drew out from that where the main costs are. You can see there are really three areas which have the biggest potential for cost savings. The tower, and what's related to the tower in many ways is everything else, because if you can take weight out of the nacelle, you reduce the tower cost. Drivetrain and blades. Our area is in the drivetrain, and we'll get to that afterwards. In terms of new entrants into the business, obviously there are a huge number of them. I'm just going to bring out two. RLE is an automotive consultancy. A couple of years ago, they decided that for strategic reasons, it was a good idea to get out of the automotive industry. You can see these are pretty smart people. They're not big in the global scheme of things. They are multinational. And they decided they wanted to get into the wind sector because they felt that their experience in quality and in cost reduction, manufacturing, and computer-aided engineering was something that could have a huge amount of value in the wind sector. And with that in mind, they purchased a company called PE Concepts, which does wind turbine modeling. They now brought that inside the company, and they're designing wind turbines. They still see themselves as a consultancy, but they're going to be bringing some interesting new technology and processes into the industry. Parker is one of the top 4 hydraulics companies, or motion control companies as they like to call themselves, in the world. Somewhat different scale from RLE, and they already work in the wind turbine sector, but not as a cohesive whole. They provide, it's probably a bit blurry and a bit hard to read, but they provide fittings and components and so on all over the wind turbines. I came across this quote about Parker developing a hydraulic wind turbine with funding from, I forget the state now, but it was something like Ohio state government. So I think, you know, when players like Parker start coming into the industry and developing completely new wind turbine transmissions, we ought to sit up and take notice. At the same time, there are smaller companies like AML. Now, I don't want to support these people. I'm not saying that I think that this is a great idea, but they claim that they can make a 10 megawatt wind turbine with a 70-ton generator, including this. So there's no other drive or anything, and they've compared it here with various other options. And I think you'll agree that if they can build this, if they can take their 55 kilowatt prototype that they have at the moment and convert it into a 10 megawatt, remains to be seen, but if they can do that, then we ought to sit up and take notice. Then Statoil Hydro, the Norwegian combination of state oil and hydro companies, has been very active in developing something they call the high wind. High wind is a floating turbine, and how serious are they? Well, there they are towing it out to sea, the first one, which I believe happened earlier this year. Offshore wind turbines, one of the biggest costs, I think something like 20 or 30% is in the foundations. So if you can eliminate the foundations, or all but eliminate them, who knows how much money you can save.
I'm sorry to interrupt. This is fascinating stuff, but we need to run out. In terms of time, just a few more minutes, please.
Sure. Chap Drive has received 5 or 6 million euros from Statoil Hydro as well. They plan to take the half of the transmission out and put it on the ground. Game breaking again. And then in Britain, there's the Nova turbine, which is quite unlike any turbine I've ever seen before. I think they were inspired by Star Trek. But they've managed to get the free vertical axis. They have the transmission at the bottom, which is much better. So what we have at Artemis is what we're working on now. We're taking our automotive technology and we're building a 1.5 megawatt, so relatively small scale at the moment, wind turbine transmission, replacing the gearbox essentially and driving, hopefully, if you weren't doing a retrofit application, a synchronous generator. What does that give you? That's a pretty big weight reduction. That's just talking about the gearbox. Take a gearbox out, replace it with something that weighs 30 to 40% of what the gearbox weighed. It's inherently more robust, and I could explain to you at length about why that is. It needs no power electronic converter, it needs no transformers, it's using a synchronous generator that's already generating high voltage. And you can dismantle most of it by hand. None of our parts in our prototype that are worn. We get worn way more than 60 kilos. All of this really comes down to lower cents per kilowatt hour, which is really what I think the industry is aiming for. But with groundbreaking technology like this, hopefully you can get really quite massive reductions. There we have our prototype in Edinburgh at the moment. So those are my conclusions there. I think that the wind turbines